We have the presentation up. We have our host here, Daphne Strassert. We're very happy to have Miss here to talk to us about how to plot your novel to the nth degree before you ever even start. It's very possible that you don't want to write every day. And so there are some days when you just need to push through. And if you have your novel plotted out all the way, sometimes you can just kind of just let your brain go on vacation and just put words on the page.
Yeah. And that's why, so this is why I'm a super planner, is because if I don't have a plan and I don't have a path that I know I'm following, then I will just procrastinate. Oh, I don't feel like it. I'll feel inspired tomorrow. That doesn't work for me. If you want to have a plan, then this is the presentation that you're going to enjoy.
I'm going to throw up in that chat that article that we were sharing around yesterday about a 12-hour writing binge as well, because I do love how it kind of frames it as there are a lot of creatives out there who are neuroatypical. And so you might be like thinking, oh, this is what everybody's doing. The Pomodoro method, 20 minutes on, 5 minutes off, something like that. And different methods, even if it seems counterintuitive to you, might be the way to go about it, because there are just so many ways that your brain might be working that doesn't fit what, let's say, the majority would want you to, write as.
Yes, that is very important. What I'm talking about today is not the end all be all of how to write a novel. You do not have to do it this way. There's lots of methods out there that work. But if you don't know where to start, then it's worth listening and giving it a try, because maybe this does work for you, or maybe it helps you find a way that works for you as well. So
as opposed to, word sprints and stuff like that. Yeah.
So let's hop in. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but why would you want to plan your novel? We talked about beating writer's block. If you have a plan, if you know technically what you're supposed to be doing, it can help you with not getting stuck saying, oh, what would my character do next? You already know. You have a plan. They got to get from here to here. It also helps you to tell a satisfying story. I am a big proponent that people, when they're reading, expect for stories to be told in a certain way. There is a reason that plot structures exist, and that is because when we see good writing, we recognize it, and there are certain aspects of good writing that are in all good stories. You want to have a novel that's well-paced. You want to have a novel where you're not getting bored in the middle. And so by planning, by setting out your plot ahead of time, you know that you're going to be coming in with that satisfying story already. You're not worried about, oh, did I spend 40,000 words doing exposition in the middle of my book? Because you would have already planned for where that exposition should go. Because of that, you can reduce rewriting when you're done. Once you're done with NaNoWriMo, you might have to spend less time working through your book again, because you don't have to go back and worry about the structure. The structure was already there. You made a skeleton before you started writing, and you fleshed it out as you went. So you know that the bones of what you're doing is good. That means that you're not going to have to go through and do a major restructuring unless something drastic happened. That can also mean that you're producing a cleaner draft, which means less editing afterwards, less shuffling stuff around. I am not going to guarantee that planning will mean that you don't have to do editing. That is absurd. You will always have to do editing, but it can make the editing process a tiny bit less painful. Sorry, I'm checking for questions in the chat. I guess I should leave that up to Sean. Let me know if people have anything.
Oh, I will jump in anytime that there is something going on. I just posted up about story arcs, and open that Wikipedia, keep it there, because it's that standard story arc that you see in so many movies and so many books. And also the note that you might have a story arc and decide to do something completely different, which is perfectly fine. This is really a Western conceptualization. To break it down is an entirely different writer's lunch, but today we're talking about very rigorous standards, and so hey, it might come in handy.
That is true. And if you're working on something that's experimental fiction, this is probably not going to apply. Experimental fiction is weird, and so if you want to do a story that's made up of 7-word sentences and has no plot, have at thee. But that's not what we're talking about today. So before you jump into the actual formal planning, you do still have to have a story, and that's where pre-planning comes in. Before we got to today, which later on in the presentation, we will be plotting my novel for NaNoWriMo. We're going to do it all together, and you can see how I'm going to go through this. But before we got to today, I spent a lot of time thinking about my story. I went on long walks with my dog. On every road trip, I put on my music and just kind of sat with my story. I let scenes play out. I played with characters. I thought about what it was I really wanted to write. So some things to ask yourself: what story do you want to tell? Are you writing a children's fantasy book? Are you writing an adult erotica? Are you writing sci-fi with a ton of technical stuff in it? You got to ask yourself, what kind of story am I setting out to write? What for you inspired the book? What is that spark inside you that wanted you to write this? Are you writing because you want to explore a certain character, or are you writing because you want to explore a certain world? Those can produce different types of books, and you're going to want to know that before you go in. So spend a lot of time just brainstorming, and don't structure yourself at this point. Make a Pinterest board with images that inspire you. Make a playlist of songs that work with it. Just write down ideas, browse character names. Just let yourself be really free form in this part, because this is you gathering your ingredients for what you're going to use later. You don't want to end up sitting in front of your computer going, okay, let me plot something out. I've got, 50,000 words and a structure to go on, but I don't know what kind of book I want to write. So this is where the natural part of being a writer is going to have to come out, where you're just sitting with your ideas and letting them play and come out in your brain. So earlier this week, I did a bunch of free writing. I grabbed my handy dandy notebook, and I just kind of sat with my characters and was just writing down everything I could think about with them, and that helped me to then later be able to pull stuff as we were going through the plotting process. So we talked about plot structure, and Sean put a link in the chat for plot structure. Now, this is probably, if you learned anything about plot structure in school, this is probably what you saw. You saw this nice little triangle. You have setup, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. This is a really unsatisfying diagram for me, because this does not actually explain how a story is built at all. The first things you learn are, a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but they don't tell you what goes in there, right? The first book story I ever wrote when I was in second grade, it was a Mary-Kate and Ashley mystery. They had lost a parrot and they were looking for their parrot, and the story consisted of them going around to 6 different people and asking, did you steal my parrot, until someone confessed. That is not a satisfying story, but I had the concept of a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the biggest problem with this triangle is that that's not how it's laid out at all. Your climax is actually much closer to the end of your book, because once the most exciting thing happens in the book, you have no more reason to read it anymore. So you're just going to want to wrap it up real quick. So your triangle actually looks more like this. You got longer rising action, climax, falling action, resolution really fast. But this doesn't solve our problem of, Daphne, what the hell is rising action? How do I get from setup to climax? What makes the book plot along so people want to read it? And this is where there's a lot of answers. There are a lot of different plot structures that you can follow. The hero's journey is an extremely famous one, works very well for fantasy novels. It is also, it's got all the steps very laid out for you. You know exactly what you're expecting. Save the Cat has 15 plot points for you to work with. It's very popular in more modern circles, and it will get you through your book as well. There's kind of more philosophical ways of building your book. There's the fractal model, which is describe your story in a sentence, describe it in a paragraph, describe it in a one page, and build your way up to your book from there. I hate that model for the reason that stories are not necessarily fractal. There is a linear structure to a story, which is events happen in a timeline. If you really, really want to do in-depth story building, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of character arcs and relationships and all of that, allow me to introduce you to Dramatica. Please go look it up. It is very interesting. I will post a link in the chat at the end of this for a very helpful website that walks you through Dramatica. But that is for the super plotters. And if you're trying to get set up for Nano in less than a month, you're probably not going to have time for the Dramatica approach. And that's not what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to do my favorite thing, which is Michael Haig's 6-stage plot structure. So this is saying that there are 3 acts to every story and that they are more or less broken up in percentages. Michael Haig came up with this by analyzing a lot of movies and seeing how exactly their plot was laid out so that the movie kept moving at a good pace and kept you engaged. And so he came up with these different stages in your book, or stages for your story, and turning points that need to happen, broken up by 0. What I do is 95 and then 100. And these percentages serve you pretty well. This is what I've written. I've written 3 books using this plot structure, and it has helped me really get through them. So let's go through it. Stage 1. We're going to set up our book. This is where you're doing introduction. Who are your characters? Where are you? Some people will say that the setup should be, what's a day in the life of your character like at the beginning? I find that a little boring because the day in the life of the character doesn't have any sort of hook for me. I want to be jumping in, knowing something interesting about our characters, doing something where who they are is important. It should still tell you who they are at the beginning of the story and give you important information about them, but also kind of be starting to lead us in a direction of, we know something interesting will happen to them. But this is where you can do a little bit of your world building, a little bit of your character building, tell us who we're playing with and in what world we're in.
Daphne, if I can, before you hop on to the next section, I did throw up Save the Cat and Dramatica into the chat if anybody wants to look at those links for later. But also, that first beginning, couple of chapters is definitely a problem where you have to be careful of an info dump. You have the propensity to say, okay, I have to set up this world so that everybody knows where there is. Everybody knows where they are. But at the same time, when you're doing your first draft, if you find that you are info dumping a bunch of stuff into there and not letting the plot move along, that's perfectly fine. You can edit those later. So just let yourself info dump, get all the stuff about the world out of your system, count that towards the 50,000 words, and know that you will probably move a bunch of stuff around later to string out the explanation.
Yeah, that is a really good way of working through it. Another thing you can do is when you're considering these first few opening scenes, think of a way that put your character in a scenario where they're interacting with the important parts of the world. Right. So I wrote a science fiction romance, Last Nano, and we're living on a world where women are completely segregated from men. The only men they see in their lives are their father, any siblings, and then their husband. And so what I have for my first few scenes is showing my protagonist interacting with her world, right? Where she has her house and that's where she sees her husband. And then she has the rest of the world that's just women, and having her interact with that in a meaningful way. So I don't have to spend for the first few pages going through the history of the planet and why we're like this. So that's another way to go through your setup without necessarily doing an info dump. So 0 to 10%. Okay. So I know that writers are not always the best math people. So we're going to talk about what that means. That can feel like a lot, the first 10% of your book. It's not. It's so not. A normal novel, let's say average novel, is about 80,000 words. For NaNoWriMo, you were writing 50,000 words. But let's say you're doing 50,000. The first 10% is only 5,000 words. That's just a couple days of work that's a chapter actually, because normally chapters are about 4,000 words, depending on what genre you're talking about. So you're talking about the first chapter, the first 2 scenes maybe. So your 10% is not a lot of words. And I also like breaking it up into percentages because it allows me to say, okay, I've got 30,000 words to get from point A to point B. Turning point number 1, this happens at the 10% mark. Now, it does say 10%. Obviously, it takes words in order to move your plot along. So this will either be part of your setup section or part of your new situation setup section, just kind of living in between both. You do need to eventually account for this scene somewhere. Turning point number 1, this is what the call to action, the opportunity. What's the very famous word for it? I don't remember. It starts with an I.
Call to action.
Inciting incident.
There you go.
Inciting incident.
Sorry, I'm eating cereal. Because inciting incident.
The inciting incident can be eating cereal. Absolutely.
That would be really interesting if someone can write a story where that's That's the inciting incident. I would be interested. This point is your character's call to the journey. This is where things are really actually starting. This is the point where this is where the story is starting for your readers. It also establishes a goal for them. So at the 10% mark, that's when, your Wizard Harry happens, right? This is where you're going into the new part of the world where the plot's really happening. Stage 2, right after that incident, from 10% to 25%, this is acclimatizing to the new situation. They realize they're up against greater obstacles, right? So if your character decides to go on this journey, this is them getting used to being on the journey, their new companions, their new world, the new stuff, the new situation that they've been thrown into. They also realize that there are stakes. So you're going to be wanting to throw some obstacles at your character. They're going to be making good progress though, right? So this is where you might have your first encounter with the villain, or maybe some henchmen that the villain has, so that your readers know that there is an antagonist in here and there are opposing forces to your character. Turning point number 2, the change of plans. This is at 25% marker. This is where your characters get not the amorphous desire that they had at the 10% mark. This is like a physical goal. I am going to win the championship football team or championship football game. I am going to defeat the dragon. I am going to marry that woman that I've always wanted to marry. It's a very specific goal. It's something that we are rooting for. We're going to keep it in our mind throughout the whole book. How are they making progress toward that goal as we are moving through this plot? What is the thing that we're hoping for that would be our happy ending? Do they get the job they always dreamed of? Do they move back to the small town to marry a vet? What is the goal? And that I also like for at this point for you as a writer to be thinking about what's your internal goal for the characters, because as your characters are moving through these parts of the book, they're going to be changing. They're going to be learning. They're going to be growing as a character. And you want to know what your inner goal is for them. Do they learn to love themselves? Do they learn to love others? Do they learn to believe in themselves again? What is the inner goal? What's the change that's going to allow them to ultimately win against whatever your antagonist is? If you're writing a tragedy, you're going to not have them really change. They're going to actually either stay the same, which is the tragedy that if they had changed, they would be able to prevent it. They either stay the same or they somehow get worse. But tragedies are their own thing. Let's go with kind of happy for right now, because that's what I'm writing. Stage 3, progress. This is your training montage, right? This is where they're learning new skills and meeting new people and things are going well. You might have more encounters with your antagonist, but they're overcome. So your character can start to get maybe like a feeling of like overconfidence. Like, this is going well. I am doing it. I am going to have no problem completing my goal. But, obviously we're only halfway through the book, so they are going to have a problem completing their goal. Turning point 3. The character is given a chance to turn back, but makes the decision to keep going on their journey. This is where something, like we had just said, that things were going well for them. This is where you want something to go kind of wrong. And they take a moment and they think, oh God, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I should go back to my hometown. Maybe I shouldn't be trying to be the hero. And they're given that choice. They're given an actual way to back out, and they choose not to, because this is where your character is taking initiative. You want your character to be taking charge of their storyline, not just having their story happen to them. So their decisions need to have impact. So if they choose to stay, that's them taking control of their own story. I feel like the 50-point mark is a good time to stop for questions. Does anyone have questions so far? You can raise your hand or toss them in the chat, whatever you want.
I have about the same perspective you do, but the inciting incident to me, I usually call the moral imperative, because it has to have not only some exciting problem to be solved, but there's got to be a moral, either a penalty or some payoff for the actual protagonist. So that's kind of my frame. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way of thinking it. Anne, you have something to add? You're muted, Anne. Anne, you're muted. There we go.
So if it's a tragedy, then they make the choice to continue. It's just that what they're continuing is not what works.
Yes, I'm not certain how well this works with the tragedy setup.
Well,
because I'm not well versed in tragedy. Sean,
yeah,
you got this one?
If I can say, the story structure of a tragedy is kind of an inverted one. So oftentimes you're watching a movie and the protagonist does not triumph until the very end. In terms of a tragedy, you would start off with your normal world. You would get to about that 25% mark and everything would start going great. You want that time of basically the best of this character's life to be in the center of the book. And then you have tragedy, like several different things that are befalling them to bring them back to as low, if not lower, than where they started. So oftentimes, you'll have this thought of as you're in your normal world, something terrible happens. What am I thinking of? A Labyrinth film. And so the baby gets stolen and she has to go to another world to save her from David Bowie, the demon. That's terrible. You got to save your little brother. So the whole rest of the movie is getting the baby brother back. If that was a tragedy, perhaps it would be the normal world. She would go off and become the queen of like David Bowie's queen, and everything is going great. And then, some of her friends die, her baby brothers get stolen, and it leaves her back, worse off than she was to begin with.
Can I add something else? Just jumping on your Labyrinth thing. The decisions this person makes when things are going well in a tragedy are what lead to their downfall. So in the example that Sean made, where she goes and becomes queen and her brother becomes a goblin because he's already been stolen, that would probably play very much into the downfall in the in the third act. But when you're doing a tragedy, you do show them and their hubris, or they have some sort of personality, I don't want to say defect, but they have a flaw that leads to their downfall. And that is expressed in this first half of the book.
And that is something that having your character have a flaw is something that all stories really have in common, because in the kind of story with happily ever after, they overcome their flaw. In the tragedy, their flaw is what crumbles their world around them.
Okay, I have a flaw. I mean, I have a flaw in my main character, and it's very sad.
Okay. I'm going to put a pin in this. We should do a writer's lunch about tragedies specifically, because they are kind of special. So let's put a note on our writer's lunch for doing tragedies in the future.
Thank you.
In the meantime, let's continue on to stage 4, complications.
Stage 4.
So stage 4, complications and higher stakes. So things get harder. The battles get more difficult. The henchmen to defeat are more difficult. You're fighting, higher up. You might actually meet your big bad at this point. You might have met him earlier, but he's getting more dangerous. The characters also have more to lose if they fail, right? So they're betting the family business on their success, or you might die if you decide to go to the Hunger Games, Katniss. There's more to lose. Everything's harder, and it's starting to look like this might have been a bad decision. And at the 75% mark, you have a major setback, and this definitely looks like it was a bad decision. 75%, something happens that makes this whole thing seem unattainable. You are never going to win this. All of the odds are stacked against you, and you're going to have to just really put everything on the line, put all you have into it, make that final push. Everything's against you, and it's time to actually start moving toward our climax. And this is where things have really picked up. We're not doing any fun little character snippets anymore. We're doing some plot work. Things are getting intense. Which brings us to stage 5, which is the final push. You're risking everything to achieve your goal. Conflict is overwhelming. We're in the lair. It's time for things to really go down. And that's leading us straight into the climax, which is you're facing your biggest obstacle. You are going to either resolve with a happy ending, or you're going to lose, and you're going to lose everything. Again, I want to point out that your character's decisions matter. You don't really want to have your climax resolved by something that is not your character's own efforts. If you have a wizard swoop in at the last moment and save everyone, that's not satisfying for the reader. We've watched these characters through their whole journey, and we want to see them succeed through their own efforts. And at the end of it, the goal is resolved, and we can move on to our aftermath, which is, how are we doing now that we've completed our journey? Do we go back to where we came from and be living our lives knowing that we are this different person? Do we not go home at all? Do we kind of just continue on with this new person we are? But you do want to have the character have made some sort of personal progress into the aftermath and show how they're different from the setup. So you can use the setup and the aftermath to sort of mirror each other, or not mirror each other, but as a juxtaposition of how the characters have grown. Final questions before we decide to like live plan a novel. It'll be fun. Okay, let's do this. So this is my novel. I'm going to be doing NaNoWriMo this year. And so I have sort of been doing some planning, but we're going to actually get it down on paper now. So let's talk about what I'm writing. I want to write a horror novel this year. I'm looking into doing horror kind of with a young adult spin. Because of that, because horror is kind of a shorter genre and young adult is kind of a shorter genre, I am looking at only doing the 50,000 words. I'm not going to be having a greater goal to get to 80,000 like I did with my novel last year. We're just going to do the 50,000. I wanted to write a horror novel that had a haunted house and it had some like eldritch stuff going on, some older gods coming in. And so I decided that my setting would be this abandoned plantation house. I needed a big setting for my characters to play in. And I wanted it to be a house. So I needed a big house. So we're doing an abandoned plantation. And this is all from me doing my walks and my thinking and my Pinterest boards. This is from me just thinking about my book. This is what I'm going into this knowing about it. These are my characters. We have Alyssa. She is a senior in high school. She's kind of a grim person and like kind of serious and a little bit brash. Her younger sister, Jessica, who is bubbly and well-liked. She's a freshman in high school, but she's the baby of the family. And so she is kind of just an annoyance to her older sister. Their friend, Ty, who is athletic and outgoing. He's actually more of their older brother's friend, but they've all kind of been friends together. And finally, we have Bryce, who is someone that we're going to meet inside the house. He's a ghost hunter from California who was documenting paranormal activity in the house. The plot point that really stuck out to me, the thing that I actually really wanted to write when I was wanting to write this book, the first concept that came in is that Bryce is actually going to be a ghost. He is not going to be someone that came into the house with them. He is going to be someone they meet inside and they find out later is actually one of the ghosts in the house. So I've got some ideas going on, but I haven't actually laid out my structure. So here we go. Here is my spreadsheet. I promised that there would be spreadsheets, and here they are. So this is my spreadsheet. I've set it up so that here at the bottom, I can put in my word count. So if I have 80,000 words, my spreadsheet will tell me how long I have for the setup, around word-wise, when each of my plot points needs to happen. So if I do an 80,000 word novel, the 50% point is 40,000. I realize I should step back and say this. As writers, you may find it really helpful to work in word count rather than page count. Page counts are different depending on how you format things. So it may be easier for you in the long run to work with word count. That is what you're going to be dealing with when you do querying for editors or any sort of publishing for short stories. You need to start working in word count if you are not already. It makes things just easier in your brain, right? A 50,000 word story is going to be the same length regardless of if it's in Kindle, paperback, or hardback. So I have my 50,000 word story. So from 0 to 5,000, this is my setup. So the story structure goes in order. But when I'm planning it, I'm not necessarily going to do that because I already have some things that I know I want to put in and some things I'm a little more fuzzy about. We know my premise and I talked about a few major things, right? So I want it to be a haunted house story. So the biggest thing that's really important for us to do is I want to get them in the house. So at the 10% mark, my goal is for them to enter the house. We're going to go into this haunted house. Some questions for me. Why are we going in the house? Why am I going in there? We're not just like appearing out of thin air. Oh, also, sorry, Ian, you said in the chat that I need this sheet in my life. I will make this available to everyone on the Facebook group later so you can have it. So at the 10% mark, they're going to enter the house. And so before that, we need to establish my characters, but we also need to establish why they're going in. So I've got some teenagers. There's a couple of options I threw around. They could be ghost hunters. They could be, they're making their TikTok videos of them going around and trying to find hauntings. They could be lost. Maybe their car broke down on the side of the road and they're just trying to get out of the rain. Or they could be going in on a dare. That happens with high schoolers a lot. Oh, go into the old Sullivan house. That's scary. You have to spend the night there. Or it could be something else. I decided I wanted to go with something else. I wanted something a little more emotionally engaging for my story. And so I was thinking about like what would possess someone to go possession. What would possess someone to go into a haunted house that would not be any of those kind of fluffy things I mentioned before. And if they're investigating something, if they're actually looking into something that they need to be in there, that maybe they don't believe in ghosts, maybe they don't believe it's actually haunted, but they're going to go investigate this house anyway. So there was a crime there, or there was something bad that happened there. And that's how I came upon the idea. Alyssa and Jessica's older brother had died there. And so they are trying to figure out what happened to him. So this is an important part of our characters. We have set up that the girl's brother died in the house. They are going to investigate. Okay. So that's good. That's a good setup. I like that. That makes me a little excited for what we're going to do. So that gives us also a goal, an emotional amorphous goal, which is figure out what happened to the brother. What happened to him? But we're going to want to have that knowledge when we get to the end of the book. So in the aftermath, they know what happened to their brother.
Yeah, I was going to say, Daphne, it's all spoilers. We're going to, like when you're doing this, there's spoilers. No, like you have to absolutely know your ending so that you can write your beginning in a plotter kind of way.
Yeah, if this book gets published and I'm the next Stephen King, you 24 people are going to know the twists. Everybody's gonna know what's happening. Okay.
Imagine people coming and like Googling this like years from now,
Spoiler
finding
alerts.
this video.
Spoiler alerts. This is how Daphne Straussert wrote her book. Okay, so other things that I've mentioned so far. Oh, right. Sorry. Another resolution, right? At the end of we want to know what happened to the brother, but also because I like happy endings, they're also going to get out of the house. I have not determined yet if anyone is going to die in the house, but someone, probably our protagonist, will make it out alive. Oops. Sorry. I have to keep my scenes in order. Okay. So I mentioned before that Bryce, the character they meet inside the house, is actually a ghost. That's going to be a big twist. I want him to be their friend for a lot of the book, be someone who's helping them, and then for them to find out that he's actually a ghost and they can't necessarily trust him anymore. That's going to be my major setback. Okay. That's going to be my major setback. Find out that he's the ghost, find out they don't trust him anymore, and then they're going to try and go on without him. They're gonna try and be working without him. All right, we got some stuff going on. Resolution is how we get out of the house. Okay, so here's a good question for everyone. If the goal at the end is to get out of the house, why don't they just leave early on? Let's up the stakes a little bit. Why don't we have at the 24 or 25% mark? Let's have the house lock them in. That's something where our stakes are a little higher, right? We came in here to investigate. We could have left at any time, but now everything is getting a lot more intense. We're now stuck in this house together with the bad ghosties. This is, I think, where spooky stuff is going to be starting to happen.
We've got a question about your plot real quick in the chat. I feel like, is Bryce one of the love interests?
Of course, this is a young adult novel. Bryce is going to be a love interest because I want to do this as a young adult novel, and I do think that it's fun to have romance. Pretty much everything I write has romance in it, but we're going to have it be fairly sweet. There's not going to be any sex in this book this time. So we've got spooky stuff happens. Good things. Actually, if the house locks them in, part of the progress will be spooky stuff happening, and so spooky stuff will happen. They meet some ghosts, which means probably this is where they meet Bryce. They either meet Bryce here or they meet Bryce in the new situation. But I think we're going to start out with they meet Bryce in progress, and I might move that later. So they enter the house. So this is them just doing investigation on their own. We're going to see some spooky rooms. We're going to do some atmospheric horror, because this is still a horror book. So we're going to have some of the stuff, doors close on their own. There's shadows where there shouldn't be. There's, someone opens a closet and they have a jump scare, something pops out at them, that sort of stuff. So we mentioned that they meet Bryce in the house, and Bryce is a ghost hunter. So if they're seeing spooky stuff at this point, why don't they immediately suspect him? And the answer I want for that is that maybe they've already met other people in the house who are life people, right? So they have no reason to suspect him. So in this section, let's have them meet some other ghost hunters. So they go into the house, they're investigating, looking out for stuff about their brother, and they happen to find that there's a group of ghost hunters there that are trying to make a video. Some of the people who their story is the plot I rejected earlier. So they meet some other ghost hunters. When the house locks them in and spooky stuff happens, they meet Bryce, and they're going to assume that he was part of those ghost hunters as well. So that makes him more reliable as a character. The point of no return. Our hero fully commits to the goal. They have a choice to turn back, but they burn their bridges. So if our character has a chance to turn back, then that's going to be they find a way out of the house. So why wouldn't they take the way out of the house if that's what we were wanting to do? If there's another reason to go back inside, not just investigating the brother, because that's not going to be a good enough reason. We're going to need something that's life and death that's going to keep them inside the house. And so let's put someone in danger. Somewhere in the progress, we are going to lose track of the friends. We're going to lose track of Jessica, the younger sister, and we're going to lose track of Ty, the friend. So the group is now separated. We've got Bryce and Alyssa together. We've got Jessica and Ty together. So if Alyssa finds a way out of the house, she can't take it. No matter how much Bryce is telling her, hey, you should leave, call for help, whatever, she can't take it. She's got to make this conscious decision. I'm going to go back. I'm going to look for my little sister, and I'm going to look for my friend. So how are we doing? We're doing good. Hey, we've got some stuff filled in. Complications, things are going to get harder. So this is where we're going to make things more complicated. The house isn't just trapping them inside. Let's give the house a reason to want them inside. I mentioned I wanted to do some eldritch stuff. So let's do some human sacrifice. The house is sacrificing people to try and bring an old god in. That's fun. That's making it not just a stereotypical haunted house. We're not just doing meaningless scares. There's a purpose to this. So let's have the ghosts will be doing, let's have the ghosts working for the house. We're going to have bad ghosts working for the house. And let's find a dead body. That really ups the stakes. We're not going to make it any of our friends because I like our friends. So we're going to have it be one of the ghost hunters. So for an emotional element, as we're going through this, we should remember our original goal, right? They wanted to know something about what happened to their brother. So as a smattering throughout these scenes, I want them to be finding out some stuff that happened with the brother. So maybe they find one of the brother's possessions. They find a note from the brother. They find out the brother got trapped in the house too at some point, so that they're reliving the same thing, right? So if the brother had gotten trapped in the house and he ended up dead, that puts our characters knowing they're in immediate danger. If they get trapped in the house, they're also going to end up dying. That gives us some more stakes. That gives us some more emotional connection to our plot. I love it. We're having a good time. Okay, sorry. She found a way out of the house, but chooses to go back for her sister. We found out that Bryce is a ghost. Characters must go on without their help. So here's our final push. Everything is overwhelming. Things are bad. So our character, let's say Jessica and Ty aren't just missing. Jessica and Ty are going to be sacrificed. So it's time. We really need to save them. We can't just, be wandering the house. We're looking how to defeat the house. It's not enough just to find our friends and scramble out. We're going to have to defeat the house in order to actually win this. There's no way to just get out anymore. We burned that bridge when we got to it. We're going to have to beat the house. And in order to do that, we're going to have to find out how we can destroy the house. So we're going to be looking for more clues and gathering supplies, gathering things that can be used to destroy the house, kindling and matches and whatever else we're going to do. I'm not sure if I want to have the house set on fire, but that sounds like a good thing to put in for now. So let's set the house on fire. There will be some sort of battling. Old god is almost released. She's probably going to have to go up against a big bad ghost. Let's say she goes up against a big bad ghost. And I want Bryce to come back. Bryce is going to come back. He's going to actually be a good guy, and he's going to help them defeat the house. We thought when we found out that he was a ghost that he was not going to help us, that he was actually harming us, but he's going to come back. He's going to help us do this. So this is looking pretty good. I'm going to continue working on this. Obviously, we're going to leave some time for questions, but I'm going to continue working on this on my own. I want to say something quick about word count and scenes. I mentioned earlier on that typically for me, a scene is about 2,000 words. That's just how I've found that it works. Sometimes they're a little over, sometimes they're a little under, but I can pretty predictably say a scene is about 2,000 words. So I will have 2 to 3 scenes in my setup. I'll have about 6 scenes in my new situation. And then we're looking more at like 8 during progress and complications. So I can put, what I'm going to continue doing once you guys are offline is I'm going to continue putting stuff into these things until I feel like I have 6 or so scenes worth of content for my new situation. And I'm going to make sure I put them in order. And then that's going to be my outline. That's what I'm going to write. I'll go sit down at my computer for the day and I'll say, okay, I wrote a scene yesterday. I'm going to write this scene today. I got about halfway through this one yesterday. We'll finish that and start a new one. And that's what's going to carry me through for NaNoWriMo is having this list of scenes. And I can change this stuff around later. If I decide that, hey, maybe we're not going to set the house on fire, then I can do that as the story builds itself. But right now, I've got some good plot and emotional stakes going on for my story that makes me feel good about where this is going to go. So that's where we're going to stop, at least for me, for today, and we can answer some questions. I'm Daphne Strasser. You can find out more about me on daphnestrasser.com. You can find me on just about every social media as Daphne the Writer. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to raise your hand or put in the chat if you have any questions, or if you want to talk a little bit about how you can use this for yourself.
So I do have a question. So a lot of times, stories will have a theme. Do you figure out the theme on the back end of outlining, or do you use the basic idea of your theme as you go through and put your structural points in?
It will depend on the story. This story, because I was looking for kind of just a fun, enjoyable plot, I wasn't working really heavily with themes. So I've discovered the themes as we've gone through it, which is, Alyssa is going to have her sister be in danger. And she realizes that this vendetta about her brother isn't as important as the relationships she already has, right? So that gets into a theme. That gets into the emotional aspect of it, about sometimes justice maybe isn't worth it, or, relying on family, those kinds of bonds. But that came out through the plotting process. That's not something I decided when I first started writing it.
Well, thank you very much, Daphne. Definitely. And I do think that people are looking forward to a blank Excel version of that my little thing, because that's something great to just, fill out as you're going. I like how you did a lot of the backstory. You're like, okay, this person's related to that person, and then maybe they're scared of this or something, but those back things, play directly into your plot and push you forward.
Yep. Yeah, definitely don't skimp on the brainstorming for your books. That stuff's going to be really helpful.
So say we weren't doing this all in a 20-minute section of a workshop. How long would you say a person who's never done this before should give themselves to use this outlining technique to actually fully flesh out the outline before they start Nano?
It's going to vary depending on the person and depending on how much of your plot you've thought about already, like how much of that brainstorming, pre-planning stuff you've done. But I would say you can usually do something like this in about an hour or two, just for the full, just filling it out. And that's just sitting down and looking at it. If you get stuck, go walk around a little bit more, look on Pinterest, and then you can hopefully get yourself unstuck from it. But it's really not too long of a process. Cece, you have got your hand raised?
I do. Thank you for the presentation. It's wonderfully done, and I wanted to thank you for that. And I also wanted to say, for me as a writer, I tend to pick up something, even if I don't get it the first time, I'll pick up something. And then as I keep going back and coming around, when I'm ready for whatever that particular next learning phase is, I'll pick up more from it. So I think it's not important that we all get everything at once, that we get something from it, and that we will, again, be able to pick up more information as we become more experienced, or we need that thing. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you, Cece. That's very true. This is not necessarily, you don't have to do it exactly the way that I do it, but if you got anything helpful out of this, then I'm really happy for you. Yeah, definitely go out and make it your own. Elizabeth, you're here. Raise your hand. You raised your hand. What's up?
Yes, I was wondering if this structure also works for a hero's journey type story or a more world building type story. Are there any modifications that need to be done? Or if you could just speak to that for a second.
I think it really does work very well for fantasy style or sci-fi style if you do have that extra world building in. But as Sean said at the beginning, you're going to want to maybe like get the info dump out of your system and then find ways to reorganize it and put it kind of throughout your story. This does work for a hero's journey. It is kind of based off of it, but it's a little looser structure. Russell?
Yeah, thanks, Daphne. This was great. I've never been on Outliner before. It was good to see how you did that. The only comment would be as you were talking about each of the blocks, and there are multiple possibilities inside each one of those. It would be good to kind of document those as you go, saying, well, this could happen or this could happen. Oh, we could burn the house down, or we could just find the core of where this ghost is located, destroy that piece of it, not the whole house. Things like that would be useful to catch as you're going through there.
Yeah, that would be a really good exercise is to put, especially if you're writing maybe a mystery novel, put like a couple of different options in there.
Right.
Things that can happen or maybe the person should think they have happened.
Yeah, this was good. I was kind of writing your book along with you when you were going through all of it.
And you had your hand raised. Do you still have a question?
Oh, you got to unmute.
Oh, I guess I
Can you hear me?
Yes, Anne.
Okay. I started out with characters and had them do whatever they felt like doing according to how I knew them. And now I know the ending. So now that I know the ending, I can arrange the things in the middle according to your outline.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The very first book I wrote, I let my characters do whatever they want. And what I learned is that most people don't follow a plot with their lives. If you were to write down, all the events that had happened in my life, it would not make a very interesting book laid out just like that. So for me, I need a structure to make them do what I want, still within their character though.
Right. Can you put that thing back on, that outline that you had at the beginning? I'm not sure I got it all copied.
Sure.
Thank you.
While
let me get to
she's
the big
doing that, I wanted to point out, Anne had kind of asked about what about people who plot /pants, and wanted to let you guys know we are having another event for NaNoWriMo next week, as well as the week after. But next week, we're going to be working on plantsing, which is kind of a hybrid between plotting and pantsing. So if you are interested in that, I did leave the link for our Eventbrite inside of the chat, so you can go straight there and sign up so that you won't forget.
I know Anna's not with us today, but Anna, our AP, is going to be talking about when you do kind of more extensive world building, but are still pantsing your way through the plot. So she's going to give some good advice on how to do somewhere between what Shannon had talked about and what I talked about today. Okay, if there are no other questions, it is just about 2:00. Thank you, everyone. We had a really great time. I will get this spreadsheet to the Facebook group, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.